This boy was expelled from the group. His name was Crash Valheim, born into the strongest lineage, yet treated like a failure. He was despised because of his ability to steal curses. Even so, thanks to him, the group reached the top. In the end, Crash was betrayed by his companion who stole the girl he loved and even sacrificed innocent people. Now, everyone despises him. He was betrayed by Arthur, who planned to leave him behind and go back in time with the girls. Stabbed in the back, Crash could only watch as those he once helped laughed at his death. But when everything went dark, he woke up 20 years in the past when he was still a child. Now, he has the chance to take revenge on the bastards who betrayed. The story opens with someone calling the boy a failure, asking what he's doing. The masked figure then orders him to quickly steal Lord Arthur's curse. Saying he's at his limit, he announces he's going to steal the curse now. Revealing his name, Crash Valheim, he readies his hand to use his ability. He is then described as a failure born into the strongest bloodline. Suddenly, his eye widens amidst the falling snow. Using the Black Hood ability, the other man begins the extraction process on him. Turning his face, the long-haired man continues to use his strange ability. It's then revealed that his ability can steal the curses of others. Despite bleeding heavily, he becomes a hero who fights against destruction. Approaching Lord Arthur, some people offer a recovery potion. Lord Arthur then looks to the side after having the curse removed. From the skies, a skeletal knight on his horse charges through the destruction. The skeletal knight's face is then shown in a dramatic close-up. A huge meteor falls from the sky, striking the ice mountain directly. He questions if they should fight the knight with so few people. With a sword stuck in the ground, a voice says it's impossible to go on. Calling for Sigrun and the others, he asks them all to come to him. The girls then gather around Lord Arthur, looking very worried. From a distance, a panting Crash watches everything and calls out Arthur's name. Angrily, he asks what the hell that bastard is doing now. Lord Arthur firmly replies that he will end it all. Kneeling in the snow, he laments that the world's hope has been extinguished. In disbelief, he stares at Arthur and asks if he's really giving up. He yells, asking if Arthur knows how many people sacrificed themselves for him. Then he sarcastically asks if hanging around with women has made him completely crazy. Furious, Sigrun interrupts and yells for Crash to shut his mouth immediately. She defends Arthur, saying he did everything he could, calling him trash. She tells him not to lecture Arthur. Extending his hand, he asks how they dare speak to their savior that way. Kneeling on the ground, he shouts that no one would have gotten this far without his ability. With a shout, he warns that he's going to refresh their memories. At that moment, Abella, the Red Witch, approaches and asks if Arthur is okay. Recalling the past, he says she couldn't use magic and begged for his help. He continues stating that she attacked him while he suffered from a curse. He then concludes that her attitude of ignoring others hasn't changed. Next, he turns to Mary, the Empire's strongest spear. He calls her a fool who always cried for him to steal her curses. Then he mentions the princess, who called him trash after his sacrifice. Looking at her, he asks if she understands what he went through to help. He recalls that her faction attacked him directly at the old academy. Showing the scene, he says they bullied him without any mercy. While humiliating him, they doubted he was even a member of the Valheim family. Despite it all, he reveals he endured it and healed her for one reason. Finally, he says he was just a useless failure who couldn't fight. He questions what the point was of cleaning up their messes for so long. To this, Arthur says that anyone could have failed, but he could have saved the world. Recalling the past, he says Arthur should have led all those fools. He remembers seeing Arthur on the front lines and deciding to stay by his side forever. So he asks why Arthur's giving up so easily right at the end. Arthur then replies that he can finally tell him the whole truth now. Revealing his plan, he says the world has ended and he will start over from scratch. Repeating the word, he asks what exactly starting over means. Arthur then reveals it's not the first time he's experienced the world's destruction. Pointing at him, Arthur reveals that his special ability is regression. He explains that this time the girls can also regress and keep their memories. The idea is that they could all start over while retaining all their accumulated experience. This would greatly increase the probability of avoiding destruction in the next world. He then states that he will start from the beginning with only the 3 girls. Clutching his chest, he asks what will happen to him in all of this. A chain tightens and Arthur grabs him by the neck with a smile. He then coldly informs him that Crash is no longer needed for the plan. Clutching his chest, he's completely paralyzed upon hearing the cruel revelation. Arthur then admits that his ability to steal curses is very powerful. He continues, explaining there's no point in going back in time with him, so worn out. Spitting blood, he hears Arthur question the point of taking him back like this. It would be much more efficient, according to him, to get him again clean and untouched. The revelation shows that the plan was always to use him and then throw him away. Arthur then tells him not to worry, as he will use him in the next worlds, too. Saying his goodbyes, he declares they will meet again, leaving Crash behind. Watching them all leave, he screams in desperation, begging them to wait for him. Reaching out his hand, he tries to get to the group as they walk away without looking back. In a memory, Arthur just watched as he was ignored by the entire group. Falling from a cliff, he screams for that bastard to take him with him. His hand loses its strength as his consciousness begins to fade completely. Clenching his fist, he gathers his last bit of strength to fight back. He then decides he won't let things end this way. His ability, Blackhood, can also steal skills, not just curses. Believing it's worth a shot, he activates his power with everything he's got. Using Blackhood, he aims at Arthur, who suddenly opens his arms. With his arms open, Arthur seems to be in the middle of his own activation. Then, a large shadowy hand lunges towards his former companion. With a smile, he's a bit confused by the result of his attempt. The shadow then envelopes Arthur, beginning the skill extraction process. Having successfully stolen the power, he feels the ability in his hand and calls out to Arthur. Weakened, Arthur asks if Crash still hasn't given up fighting him. Touching his hand, Crash says he's already been through countless destructions. He reveals that Arthur left him behind in all the other worlds, saying that now Arthur is the one being left behind. He hears Arthur ask if he's gone mad. Smiling, he stares intently at Arthur, showing that the tables have finally turned. Pointing to the knife, he replies that maybe he really has gone mad. He then reminds Arthur that the world would only face complete destruction. With his hand on his chest, Arthur is completely shocked by what's happening. His eye widens, unable to believe the scene he is witnessing. Looking down, he remains paralyzed, unable to show any reaction. Then, he tells Arthur to fight alone if he doesn't want to die right there. From the sky, a powerful beam of energy descends speed towards him. Declaring his intention, he announces that he will be the one to save the next world. The scene changes, and he appears lying down, his eyes tightly shut. His face sweating, he remains motionless in bed for another moment. Suddenly opening his eye, he seems to finally awaken from a deep sleep. Reaching out his hand, he screams in fear upon waking up in a completely different place. Looking around, he tries to understand where he is and what happened. Seeing a large window, he begins to recognize the room he's in. Sitting on the bed, he realizes he's in the house where he lived as a child. With the regression complete, he notes that he is not as young as he appears. The narration explains the world erosion, a phenomenon where one world is consumed by another. When the erosion occurs, the environment changes and a creature attacks one of the warriors. As a result, species from other worlds invade, bringing destruction wherever they go. Among them, creatures that resemble humans are a special kind of threat, called world invaders. One of them attacks the village, making everyone run. Fighting against the erosion, a group of warriors prepares to face the threat. Preparing his staff, one of the members gets into position to launch a major attack. Known as the Azure Generation, the battle begins with everyone advancing together against the enemy. And there among them, he watched the situation with a very serious and distant expression. With a body that only sealed curses, he ended up joining the Azure Generation. Used as a vessel, he was betrayed and lived a miserable life. Back in his room, he looks up with a very surprised expression on his face. Waking up startled, he sits up in bed, trying to understand his surroundings. He then looks around and wonders if this is really his room. Touching his face, he realizes it's now summer, unlike the winter from before. Concluding he's in his childhood hall, he remains seated on the bed, remembering the fight. He used Blackhood on Arthur as a last resort. He then realizes he successfully stole the regression ability. With a hand on his head, he lets out a slightly awkward laugh. Sitting on the floor, he wonders how he managed to steal the skill. The explanation reveals that people think Blackhood has no usage restrictions, but the truth is his ability has a very obvious flaw. To work, it needs to unlock a lock that the target skill generates when activated. This lock is created based on the value the owner places on the target. If the owner considers it precious, the difficulty of stealing it increases significantly. That's why things the opponent values are much harder to steal. He thinks that the greater the value, the harder the theft should be. Remembering Arthur, he's confused about what happened at the end of the fight. At that moment, he saw Blackhood activate, but he couldn't see any lock. Then it hits him. Arthur wanted to abandon his own regression ability. That Arthur, the hero king, wanted to discard his powerful regression ability. Remembering the past, he starts thinking about how Arthur sometimes acted. His former leader always wore an exhausted expression, as if fulfilling an obligation. Repeating the destruction alone, it would have been impossible for him to remain completely sane. So, He understands that for Arthur, regression was the same as a curse. That's why he made the three girls inherit the memories and tried to regress with them. Then, he realizes the plan was simply to leave him out of everything. But the fact that he stole the skill with Black Hood changes everything completely. This means that the Arthur of that world was left behind without regression. Hit by the meteor, he couldn't escape the destruction of the Blue Knight. Turning around, he says Arthur should thank him for stealing the skill he hated. Giving a slight laugh, he seems to understand the great irony of the whole situation. He then remembers how the group always left him behind alone. They all acted as if receiving curses was something anyone could do easily. Without ever caring, they just ignored all the suffering he was going through. With a smile, he says that bastard deserved what happened to him. Looking at his reflection in the mirror, he notices his body is now very small. He then sees that he's around 10 years old with a short and muscular body. Being the result of training every day, he was trying to survive in the Valheim family. Being there, he understands he's right after the 10-year-old's ordeal ceremony. The Valheim family ceremony tested the skills and contract of each member. In it, the better the contractor, the higher the lord's status became in the family. Born without talent, none of the lords ended up choosing him during the ceremony. After that, he was kicked out of the main house with nowhere to go. He was then sent to Blue Pine Hall, where the failures stayed. Looking out the window, he recognizes himself as the biggest failure of the Valheim family. Despite everything, he's the only one who knows about the end of the world. An end that not even the powerful Azure generation was able to prevent. Pondering, he wonders if he could stop the coming destruction. He then questions if he would be able to prevent the destruction of the entire world. Placing his hand on the glass, he watches the blue sky outside. Clenching his fist tightly, he tells himself not to be a coward. He then realizes it's not a question of whether he can stop the end or not. Remembering the battles, he understands he must stop the destruction no matter what. After all, if the world is destroyed, he will die along with it. With a determined smile, he concludes there is no other choice to be made. Taking a step, he thinks the first stage to avoid everything starts now. At that moment, an older man appears at the door, calling him young master. Surprised to see him, he asks what Ariad is doing in that place. Being the butler who took care of him, he hugs him with a big smile. In a memory, a voice asks when Ariad plans to use the poison he received. Then he discovers his brother gave Ariad the poison to kill him. Ariad was the first person who poisoned him and taught him what betrayal was. Elsewhere, a girl charges forward, taking down several opponents with a single strike. She then defeats another guard who collapses to the ground as everyone watches. Shocked, the men comment that the knights can't even lay a finger on her. This is Charlotte Valheim, Crash's half-sister, and she finds the situation quite boring. One of them remarks that he's heard she's a prodigy born once in a millennium. Just then, her half-brother Verokan overhears that she will prevent the extinction of the Valheim family. With a furious glare, he says he will end that entire bloodline. But his advisors warn that attacking Charlotte is too risky right now. With a malicious smile, he decides he'll start by killing his brother first. Changing scenes, he calls the butler Ariad for a private conversation in the room. He then claims that Crash is blocking Ariad's path to advancement. Offering a vial, he says the poison will solve all the butler's problems. Ariad hesitates, explaining that he raised the young master as if he were his own son. Sitting in his chair, Verokan just stares at him and calls his name coldly. He then asks if Ariad will choose someone else's son over his own daughter. With his head bowed, the butler firmly replies that he cannot do that. Blood then splatters onto the plate of food, staining everything on the hall floor. His hand then trembles in the air as he seems to lose all his strength. Remembering the scene, he holds Ariad in his arms and calls his name in desperation. As holds him, Ariad apologizes to the young master before finally passing away. With blood-stained hands, he hears Ariad say that he considered him a son. Letting his hand fall, he wonders what he has done now. Unable to bear the guilt, Ariad took the poison and left this world behind. The memory shows the voice asking when he will use the poison he received. He recalls the revelation that his brother gave the poison to the butler. Returning to the present, he confronts Ariad about the plan to sacrifice him for his daughter. When asked if he knew, the butler just remains silent with his head bowed. Seeing his reaction, he says it's useless if the butler is going to feign ignorance. He then turns and says the order would never have existed if he weren't such a failure. The butler just watches, surprised by the young master's unexpected reaction. Turning back to the butler, he shows a very different and determined expression. Extending his hand, he asks the butler to just follow him now. They then arrive at the Grand Library, a place filled with books and shelves. Ariad then asks why they suddenly went to the study. Pointing a finger, He orders the butler to cut that wall immediately. He then says that a Valheim butler would find the task quite easy. Stepping forward, Arid prepares to carry out the strange order. Wielding his sword, he positions himself to make a single, precise cut. He holds the sword with both hands, focusing his energy into the strike. With a single motion, the sword slices through the wall with great ease. Opening a hole, the secret passage is revealed, and he praises the cut. Surprised by the passage, Arid hears him congratulate him on a job well done. At that moment, the butler realizes the young master is completely different from yesterday. He then notices the passage is illuminated with moonlight pearls. Seeing the locked door, he approaches to examine the large lock. Looking at the door, he comments that the place brings back many memories. Back then, everything had already been completely burned down and was in ruins. But this time, he managed to get there before everything was destroyed. Arid then asks if he should cut the chains locking the door. He replies no, as the chains cannot be cut by normal means. Preparing to test his abilities, he activates the Black Hood skill once more. The shadows from the skill creep forward and begin to envelop the entire lock on the door. Then, the chains shatter and the lock falls to the floor, startling Ariad. Ariad asks in shock if he has made a contract with one of the lords. He then remembers that at that point, he hadn't yet made the contract. He then replies that he made a contract with some insignificant lord. The butler just watches, left completely speechless by the drastic change. Ariad remembers that just yesterday, the young master seemed to have lost his will to live. He concludes that the boy changed overnight after making the contract. Seeing his potential, he believes the young master could become a great warrior. Ariad swallows hard, looking very tense about the whole situation. He then calls out to the young master, still recovering from the huge shock. Making a promise, he vows that he will not tell anyone about the secret. At that moment, the boy realizes the great flaw of the regression ability. By acting differently than in the past, he notices that Ariad is also changing now. But the memory of the Ariad who betrayed him remains vivid in his mind. He then thinks that by healing his daughter, he can earn his complete loyalty. Holding a peace, he decides he needs to increase his number of pawns while he's here. He says he'll think about the daughter later, telling Ariad to do as he pleases. With the secret library as the priority, he approaches the wooden door. Suddenly, the door's lock begins to react in an unexpected way. His eyes widen, surprised by what is happening right in front of him. A powerful energy explodes from the door, throwing them both back forcefully. Hit by the blast wave, he is shocked by the force of that energy. Feeling the pressure, he concludes that his grimoire is inside. Looking up, they see a shelf glowing intensely inside the secret library. Finding the book, he realizes he's in the secret library of Blue Pine Hall. It was a special place where the failed ancestors recorded their techniques and memories. They preserved the grimoires through their achievements, not because of skills. At first, anyone could enter, but because of one person, it became a secret library, and that person was none other than Damaris Valheim, a figure from the past. Being the worst failure in history, he forever marked the family's name. After being consumed by the erosion, he ended up becoming the strongest of all. Just then, he realizes that this is the grimoire left behind by the worst of the failures. Reaching out his hand, he apologizes to his ancestors for taking so long to arrive. Known as Damaris Valheim, he emerges as a figure of absolute power. Called the greatest failure, he was also the strongest in history. Because of his fame, the world's strongest warriors challenged him. Effortlessly, he catches and neutralizes an enemy's attack. Then he unleashes his strength, sending all his opponents flying. Faced with his power, no one could even stand before him. That was his devastating technique, known as extreme blood immersion. All because he possessed a method to absorb the world's erosion. Years later, a young Crash said he didn't understand how Damaris lost control. Recalling the past, he reveals that he too was targeted by terrible curses. Then, he realizes he can use one curse to nullify another. His plan was to steal a curse that could control the first one's fury. Thus, the two curses begin to clash inside his body. As a result, the conflict between them generates a new energy. Seeing the outcome, he realizes he can also become much stronger. Calling for Ariad, young Crash gets the attention of his butler. Giving an order, he forbids anyone from entering the Blue Pine Hall. Accepting the command, Ariad walks down the hall with his sword in hand. Determined, he states that he will refuse Verikin's proposal to honor Crash. Furious with the refusal, Verikin screams, demanding to know the reason for the decision. Still shouting, he says they can't keep someone like Crash in the family. In a flashback, he blames Crash's mother's interference in the past. He laments that he and his sister could have kept their positions. With a contorted face, he grinds his teeth with great force. Back in the present, He yells for a servant who appears in the hallway. Verokan then orders the servant to go to the hall and find out the reason for the refusal. But the servant informs him they cannot enter, leaving Verokan confused. He then explains that Ariad has sealed the gate and barred everyone from entering. In disbelief, Verokan questions if not even the head of the family can enter. Calling Crash a failure, he rages while the boy continues to meditate alone. Finishing his meditation, he forcefully expels the air from his lungs. Clenching his fist, he wonders if he has already reached the specialist level. The various realms of aura mastery are then introduced. The specialist level is the line that separates common people from geniuses. He remembers that his half-sister Charlotte is already almost a master. Even that unprecedented monster Charlotte was unable to prevent the end. In his past life, she was completely powerless against the world's destruction. Compared to her, he is still just at the entry level of a specialist. Therefore, he questions if he can truly protect the world at this pace. His older version appears, saying he'll only know if he tries. He then tells him there's no need to lament his weakness. Continuing, he says that everything is different now from his past life, because now he can grow with the grimoire left by the family's failures. With a smile, his two versions face each other with the same determination. Full of confidence, he declares that he can become much stronger. Arriving to greet him, Ariad congratulates the young master on entering the specialist realm. Taking the towel, he asks them not to make a fuss over something like that. As he dries himself, he asks why the butler was waiting for him there. Ariad then informs him that his fiancée, Lady Bianca, has arrived at the Blue Pine Hall. Hearing the news, he freezes completely, not knowing what to do. Then, he remembers her as Bianca, the fearsome white demon of the future. In his past life, she became a servant to the world's invaders. But he remembers that for now, she is just the youngest daughter. Seeing the girl at the gate, he understands that this is a political marriage. This way, her family gains connections while getting rid of a failure. With a smile, he says they are both being used by their families. He then comments that he already had business with her, finding the visit convenient. The story reveals that Bianca's mother was afflicted by a curse. Because of this, Bianca was also born with a curse in her body. Called the Snow Doll, the curse left her completely emotionless. Being a curse that affected the soul, not even specialists could remove it. Born in her mother's place, Bianca was treated coldly her entire life. The entire Heart of Hearts family saw her only as a cursed and useless girl. Remembering this, Crash wonders if she hated him in his past life. With a smile, he says he hopes he won't have any trouble stealing the curse. Explaining his plan, he reveals that her curse is what he needs. Asking for clothes, Ariad promptly offers to prepare them, and he accepts immediately. After getting dressed, he orders them to bring the girl inside the mansion. 5 months ago, he contemptuously dismisses the girl. Shouting, he accuses her of only wanting the Valheim family's power. Faced with the accusations, she remains standing in silence, showing no reaction. Soon after, the room's door closes, leaving the girl alone. In her thoughts, she admits she didn't want to be there either. Remembering the past, her father used to say they needed the alliance to survive. With destiny in her hands, Bianca just clenched her fists tightly. Her father kept saying that the family's future depended entirely on her. Back then, he was just a pessimistic, sharp-tongued loser. Hand to her face, she recalled that unpleasant meeting. She reveals that if she could have, she would have been the first to refuse the deal. Back in the present, he reacts with a surprised exclamation. With a smile, he apologizes for the hot tea, knowing she doesn't like it. Without a word, she just stares at the tea and cake on the table. Changing the subject, he invites her for a walk in the mansion's garden. Calling for Ariad, he asks them to prepare some macadamia cookies in the garden. Walking beside her, he says it's nice to spend some time together. Smiling, he jokes that she doesn't look like a bride, but a commander. Hearing his comment, she stares at him in silence for a few moments. Just then, she realizes he even knows her favorite cookies. Arriving in the garden, he comments on the piece, but she cuts him off. Looking directly at him, she asks if he is really the true Crash. After her question, the two stare intently at each other for a brief moment. He then gets closer and touches her hair, surprising the girl. Asking if he seems so different, he releases a bit of his power. Immediately, she is startled, feeling the murderous intent coming from him. Quickly, and apologizes, thinking she offended him with her question. Remembering that day, he says his memories from that time are quite vague, but he claims there's one thing he never forgot. It was the same expression she had on the day of her death. Deciding to lie, he explains that he recently managed to form a contract with a god. Surprised by the news, she congratulates him and says she understands the change. He then says he has a proposal, leaving the girl a bit confused. Worried, she asked if he's trying to break off their engagement. Awkwardly, he says he would understand if she wanted to call off the engagement. With a serious expression, she stares at him without saying a single word. Declaring she is his fiancée, she states with conviction that this won't change. Surprised, he is speechless at the words he never expected to hear. Composing himself, he says he needs to get back to the main point of their conversation. Extending his hand, he reveals that he actually wants her curse. Not understanding, she questions why he wants a curse that no one can break. Confirming he needs the curse, he offers her a wish in return. Thinking about the situation, she assumes he wants to erase his emotions because of his family. In her mind, the family strain drove him to this extreme desire. She then questions if this is some kind of mental illness. Remembering old advice, she recalls that minds on the edge can break. After that, the person might act strangely, as if their personality has changed. That wise man warned her that if someone close reached this dangerous point, the only right thing to do would be to simply stay by that person's side. Holding his hand, she says he can overcome this without any curse. Completely confused by her reaction, he tries to explain that there has been a huge misunderstanding. Ignoring him, she says she will visit him often, maybe even move nearby. Admitting she doesn't like him, she states she can't abandon someone on the verge of a breakdown. At this, he realizes she is completely misunderstanding the situation. Seeing this won't work, he decides he will test his ability secretly. Activating his power, he prepares to use the Black Hood ability on her. But instead of stealing it, the ability begins to generate a new condition. Suddenly, the power turns against him, causing an unexpected reaction. Then the unlock condition appears. He needs to become friends with Bianca. Realizing it's a double lock, he understands the curse is a vital part of her. Therefore, his condition is to befriend a girl with no emotions. Sending her back home would only accelerate her transformation into the terrible white demon. Deciding to cooperate, he says he's happy to see her more often. At this, she says she will confirm with her father and will be back soon. Watching her leave, he decides to use the time to read as many grimoires as possible. The next day, a large carriage arrives, unloading several boxes at the gate. Curious about the arrival, he approaches to see what's happening. But suddenly, a familiar voice from the carriage calls his name. It was Bianca, who announces she'll be living there in the hall from now on. Completely shocked, he shouts, asking why they have to live together there. Slowly opening his eyes, he's met with a rather unexpected scene. Beside him in bed, Bianca was still sleeping very soundly. Seeing she had slept there again, he wonders what he should do. Yawning, he says that someone might get the wrong idea about the situation. Waking up confused, she asks what he's doing there, and he asks her the same question. After some time, he continued his days of intense training at the mansion. He then realizes that a few months have already passed since she arrived. The scene flashes back to the day she announced she would be living there. Asking them to take good care of her, she left the boy completely speechless. When he asked how she managed to move in, Bianca replied it wasn't a problem at all. Worried, he asks if she'll be okay being so far from her family at such a young age. He then assumes her lack of emotions prevents her from feeling homesick. Despite everything, he sees this as an advantage in becoming her friend. As time goes on, he realizes the year is almost over. Thus, the opening of the long-awaited Lahelny Academy is drawing ever closer. In his past life, that academy trained countless members of the Blue Generation. Many of them ended up with ridiculously overpowered abilities back then. Remembering those students, he grinds his teeth with great force and anger because he knows their weaknesses. He plans to steal everyone's abilities at the academy. With a year to prepare, he knows he needs to get much stronger. Unfortunately, his natural talent seemed to be reaching its limit. With the grimoires, he can only reach the initial stage of an expert. To overcome this barrier, he needs to steal the curse and use immersion. Arriving in the room, he asks if Bianca was waiting for him again. She confirms, saying she can't alone for too long. Ever since, she's been following him everywhere like a little bird. He then wonders how long it will take for her to see him as a friend. As he's about to ask her out, Ariette appears and calls for the young master. Ariette then informs him that an invitation from the Star Sanctuary has just arrived. It was a formal event for the young nobles of the kingdom to meet. Thanking the butler, he takes the invitation and confirms he remembers the event. In his past life, he isolated himself, so his memories are vague. His expression turns serious as he considers the decision to go to the sanctuary. Remembering a promise, he decides to go to prevent the tragedy from repeating itself. Confirming he'll attend, Bianca announces she'll go with him to the event. She then warns him, saying that people will likely criticize him a lot. Suggesting it would be better, he tells her not to go to avoid trouble. But Bianca refuses the suggestion, insisting she will go with him anyway. She then states that protecting her partner is the duty of a true fiancé. Patting her on the head, he says he just wanted her honest opinion. At that, she looks at him with the same supportive gaze she has always shown. The scene shows moments from the past few months where he was kind to her. Remembering his treatment, she comments that no one has ever treated her that way. Because of his kindness, she almost forgot the terrible first meeting they had. So, she decides to go with him, not as his fiancé, but simply as herself. Hearing her declaration, he is left completely surprised and speechless. With a faint smile on her face, she just confirms that's how she feels. Arriving at the location, they come across the Grand Star Dragon Pavilion. Once inside, he is impressed by the wealth while Bianca feels ill. It's explained that nobles are respected for fighting against the world's erosion, but instead of training, many of them just enjoy themselves at luxurious parties. Stepping onto the carpet, the two walk toward the entrance of the hall. Once in the main hall, he wonders how many decent nobles are actually there. As they are announced, the guests comment on the arrival of the failure and the cursed one. At that, a woman warns others not to stare too long, or they'll be cursed too. Ignoring the comments, he observes everyone, surrounded by fake nobles on all sides. Suddenly, a noble figure hears the name Valheim and shows great interest. He then realizes there are also some true nobles in the Grand Hall. Among them was Balakogma, a future member of the powerful Blue Generation. Beside him was the imposing Kasagi Elfin Amelia, also from that generation. Completing the trio was the Forest Archer, Annex Greiser. Seeing the interest from the three of them, he finds their attention a bit strange. He soon remembers that the real reason was his half-sister Charlotte. Remembering the past, she used to boast that no one could even beat her in a duel. Calling the sanctuary a dump, she would show off her superiority to everyone there. After the event, she would just say that the whole thing had been very boring. Returning to the present, he realizes she must have caused trouble here before. Noticing his distraction, Bianca lightly tugs on his clothes to get his attention. She tells him to ignore them, and he says he was just thinking about Charlotte. Stroking her head, he says he doesn't mind at all. Changing focus, he wonders when the person he's waiting for will appear. Suddenly, all the guests look toward the entrance of the Grand Hall. Then the herald announces the arrival of the long-awaited Lord Darling Danforlion. Arriving extravagantly, the eccentric noble greets everyone in the hall. Back in the past, Darling finds him covered in curses and wonders what happened. Analyzing the situation, he begins to gesture with his hands in preparation. Touching his face, Darling says he can combine the curses to heal him. He then invites him to be his test subject, promising a complete cure. Seeing the lack of response, he asks if the boy doesn't even have the strength to speak. Without waiting for permission, Darling announces he'll just start the procedure right now. Startled, he widens his eyes as he sees the energy forming in front of him. Trying to stop him, he shoves him away with a desperate scream. He then calls him a maniac, revealing this was his first encounter with Darling Danforlion. Back in the present, Darling's arrival causes a stir among the guests. Knowing what he's like, Crash says he would never miss an event like this. Asking Bianca to wait, he and some other boys grab food from the table. With her mouth full, she agrees to wait for him there. Across the hall, Darling watches him, finding his face familiar. Coming closer, the boy formally introduces himself as Crash Valheim. Hearing the name, Darling realizes he really does look like Charlotte. With sparkling eyes, he asks if the boy is her younger brother. Getting straight to the point, Crash asks what he wants, but Darling just toys with the situation. Then he reveals he knows Darling has been investigating the world invaders. With a smile, he asks if that topic happens to catch his attention. Seeing his audacity, Darling calls him a rather bold boy for his attitude. He then warns him to prepare for the consequences and closes the room's door. Now alone in the room, he wants to know Crash's current age. Before hearing the answer, he picks up a small vial, examining it carefully. Crash answers that he's 13, while Darling now holds 2 large swords. With no time to waste, he says he has the mind of a grown adult. With a smile, Darling encourages him to continue and say what he wants. Suddenly, Darling throws one of his swords toward the boy. His body frozen, he just watches the blade coming toward him. He then manages to defend himself from the surprise attack that followed. Annoyed by the attack, he yells, wanting to know what Darling is doing. With a smirk, Darling explains he just wanted to test his skills first. Finding this whole thing a drag, he just glares at the noble with irritation. Keeping up the fight, Darling says he'll listen and tells him to talk. Going on the offensive, he lunges with a quick strike against the noble. Blocking the blow, Darling asks if he wasn't a talentless failure. Crossing swords, he replies that he trains every single day without stopping. Then he reveals he can help with his research on neutralizing curses. Surprised, Darling asks what he knows about alchemy to be able to help. With a focused gaze, he continues to defend against the alchemist's attacks. Taking a quick step, He prepares to turn the tables in the fight. Caught by surprise, Darling is left speechless by the unexpected counterattack. Disarming him, he reveals he knows about the work on the erosion curses. He then explains that the theory is to use other curses to nullify them. Stopping the fight, Darling now listens intently. Holding his sword firmly, offering his help, he says he will collaborate on that important research. He then reveals he'll do it, using his ability to steal any curse. Completely shocked, Darling can't believe he can use aura that way. Thinking about the proposal, he begins to understand the possibilities of this collaboration. With a smile, he says, "This is perfect," and asks for the price. Rejecting the idea, he explains he needs a potion to suppress curses. He then adds that just stealing others' abilities won't be enough. After all, not even the blue generation could stop the apocalypse in the past. Being a failure, he states that he needs to try every possible method. Darling comments that he seems to have regained the motivation he lost at Charlotte. Thus, the overwhelming genius and the stubborn misfit are shown side by side. Seeing the two siblings, Darling blushes completely, at a loss for words. Regaining his composure, he says he has one more question for the boy. He then asks if Crash intends to enroll in the new Lehelny Academy. Confirming with a smile, he says, of course he'll enroll. Accepting the proposal, Darling offers his potions, saying he'll help with everything. Then, Crash says he has another favor to ask him. Asking about the discoloration disease, he wants to know if Darling is familiar with it. He then asks the alchemist to create a cure for that incurable disease. Darling says even he can't do it, but Crash claims he succeeded in the future. Lowering his gaze, he maintains his serious and determined expression on the matter. Clenching his fist, he shows all his conviction in what he just said. Then he states with absolute certainty that Darling can do it without a problem. His pride wounded, Darling cracks a smile, accepting the proposed challenge. Sealing the deal, the two bump fists in a gesture of trust. Already at the door, he says something has been bothering him a lot. He then asks if Darling likes his sister. Receiving an overly enthusiastic response, confused, Crash asks about and talking about boyfriends and empty places. Darling explains that he also likes men, as he's interested in both. Hearing this revelation, he's completely shocked, not knowing how to react. In shock, the noble shouts, questioning if he really heard the word by force. Crash then accuses him, saying he was about to lay a hand on a 12-year-old girl. He continues the accusation, and the noble panics, screaming it's not like that at all. Desperate, he yells that he was just following Lady Claudia's orders. Surprised, Crash wonders if he means Claudia from the Kingdom of Starin. He explains that the order was to take Lady Bianca, and he had to use force. At that moment, his gaze turns to the young Lady Bianca. As the youngest daughter of the Heart and Hearts family, Bianca is despised for her curse. He wonders why that princess would have specifically summoned young Bianca. Thoughtfully, he concludes that something about this whole story doesn't add up. He then realizes there must be some other connection behind it all. A connection linking a noble directly to the second princess. Then, the image of a specific noble with a smirk comes to his mind. Clenching his fist, he remembers the archer, NX, who pursued Charlotte. He recalls that after being humiliated, the young man became completely obsessed. Remembering the past, he knows Annex targeted him because he couldn't defeat Charlotte. With a contemptuous sigh, he finally understands the whole setup. Irritated, he realizes that Annex is now trying to drag Bianca into this mess. He then announces that he'll go, leaving the noble utterly confused by his answer. Clarifying the situation, he says he's not going to see the princess, but Annex. Holding her hand, he criticizes the fallen noble's lack of instinct. Asking Bianca to go with him, the girl agrees, accepting his invitation. Together, the two start to walk away down the hall, leaving the noble behind. As they walk, he asks Bianca why she refused to go before. She begins to answer, remembering a vision she had of a wedding. She says she thought he would abandon her, but he didn't. He then asks why she disobeyed the order, ignoring a royal summons. Simply, she says it was because he asked her to wait for him. Surprised by her answer, a slight smile forms on young Crash's face. Patting her on the head, he tells her she did very well. Arriving at the door, they find Balak, who is stretching energetically. With a grin, he seems to recognize the newcomer's arrival. Balak then greets him, and Crash replies that he came looking for Annex directly. He explains that Annex had already given orders to let the boy through. Seeing the situation, Crash remembers that this was Balak Hogma, the young tiger. He recalls that Balak is a talented swordsman and completely unpredictable in combat. Heading toward the door, he realizes Annex sent him as a test. Suddenly, Balak challenges him, saying he was curious and wanted to fight. He argues that if Crash has already fought Charlotte, fighting him should be no problem. Even among the strongest, Balak was known for his sharp intuition. That's why Crash preferred to avoid a confrontation before finally finding Annex. Looking into his eyes, Crash realizes the young man won't give up so easily. With no other choice, he accepts the challenge and clenches his fist, preparing himself. Just then, Balak lunges forward, launching the first attack against young Crash. Dodging the blow, he leaps over his opponent with a precise acrobatic move. Planting his hands on the floor, he quickly spins his body to launch his counterattack. Then he comes down with a powerful strike, hitting Balak directly in the chest. With a concentrated expression, he puts all his strength into the single punch. The impact sends his opponent flying violently backward across the hall. Balak falls to the floor, knocked out by his opponent's swift and devastating attack. After the strike, he observes the fallen body, a little surprised by the result. Getting up, Balak says that Crash really doesn't hold back in his fights. Rubbing his neck, he replies that Balak himself was the one who challenged him. Excited, Balak asks for another round and questions if he can use his weapon this time. He then asks, more seriously, if his opponent can even stand. With a smile, Balak gets ready, but blood starts to trickle from his nose. Confused, he notices the injury a second before losing consciousness. Unable to stay on his feet, he falls backward, finally defeated. At that, Bianca asks what he did, and he answers that it's a secret technique. The technique is described as a short-range strike passed down from his ancestors. He remembers saving the secret technique before everything burned down. Explaining to Bianca, he says this move has saved him countless times. Looking at the fallen Balak, he warns that the guy won't be getting up anytime soon. Just then, the hall door opens, revealing what awaited them inside. On the balcony, Annex and Kasagi turn around upon hearing the noise from the entrance. Annex then asks, surprised, what could have happened to the guard Balak? With a sideways glance, Annex admits he's surprised that Crash defeated Balak. Crash retorts, asking if that wasn't the plan all along. Pointing at his rival, he says he came to settle things with him personally. Annex asks how he figured it all out, and Crash ironically confirms the rumors of him being a failure. Approaching him, he warns that after he defeats him, this story will be different. With a smile, he says that after this fight, the rumors about him will change. He says if the rumor is true, fine, but that changes today. With a smile, Annex just stares at him in silence, not rising to the challenge. Crash then remembers his former colleague, a nobleman named Annex Greiser. In a flashback, he recalls the time they spent together at the Academy and in the Azure Generation. After all this time, he realized Annex only kept him around because he was useful. His purpose was to be bait thrown in front of dangerous monsters. In the chaos, he grows desperate, seeing that everyone else has fallen. Clinging to the edge, he begs for Annex's help, who just watches him from above. Annex explains that his reputation would be tarnished if it were discovered that he led them into a trap. He concludes that if he is the only survivor, no one will ever know the whole truth. Shouting, he warns that he won't let that happen, and that Annex will be expelled. With a cold smile, Annex says not to worry because the blame will fall on him. He continues, saying that since everyone already hates him, the matter would soon be forgotten. With a sarcastic thank you, he bids his friend farewell, leaving him to his fate. Furious, he yells, asking if Annex ever considered him a real friend. He yells that Annex only got close to him to get near Charlotte. Coldly, Annex replies that's exactly why he can't stand him. Continuing the insults, he accuses him of having no skill and only twisting words, saying it all ends when Charlotte gets married. Annex simply turns his back. Looking back, he comments that maybe it's better for things to end this way. While Annex wishes for a beautiful ceremony, the young man starts to lose his strength. Unable to hold on, his hand finally slips from the cliff's edge. Seeing his imminent fall, he wonders if this is really his end. Suddenly, Arthur appears and catches him, asking if he's okay. Returning to the present, he reflects that this was the beginning of his next misfortune. He remembers that Annex was expelled and then desperately tried to get married. Tauntingly, Annex says he even talks and looks like his sister, Charlotte. Annoyed, he realizes that in the end, some things never change. Warning him not to use her name, he asks if he thinks they look alike. Preparing for the confrontation, he moves into an attack stance against his rival. Moving forward, he says that they may be similar, but he'll show him the difference. With a confident smile, Annex just faces the challenge from his former colleague. Leaping to attack, he is intercepted in midair by a tree branch. Placing his hand on the branch, he uses the obstacle to gain new momentum. He then launches himself from the branch, spinning his body for a direct aerial attack. His fist lands squarely on Annex's face, snapping his head back. Even as he's hit, he manages to use his power to counter the blow. Thrown into the air, he is forced to retreat from the unexpected counterattack. Several branches then shoot out of the ground, trying to hit him while he's in the air. Landing safely, he positions himself in front of Bianca to protect her. Looking at his rival, he comments that Annex is as troublesome as ever. Annex then taunts him, saying he should use a weapon to fight. His secret technique is based on strengthening and controlling plants with his energy. Questioning if he should use a weapon, he breaks off one of the branches from the ground. With a smile, he announces he will fight using his opponent's own plants. With a smirk, Annex asks if he really thinks he can do that. Challenging him, he sends several branches to attack, telling Crash to try and block them. Dodging with agility, the young man evades all the branches with no difficulty. In shock, Annex wonders how he managed to dodge an attack like that. He then says that Charlotte might have been able to, but Crash is just a failure. With a smile, Crash announces that Annex is simply his natural enemy in this fight. He explains that he's seen his abilities before, so he knows every move. Taunting his rival, he asks if Annex is still thinking about young Charlotte. Irritated, he asks if the boy is sure he wants to push his luck. Annex then releases a wave of power, striking the ground with his branches. Jumping back, he manages to escape and create a safe distance from the attack. Using his technique, he summons an enormous wooden titan from the ground. With a smile, he announces the name of his technique, the powerful wooden titan. Seeing the scene, Kasagi screams desperately, begging Lord Annex to stop immediately. She knows that if that attack hits Crash, the situation will be irreversible. Seeing the enormous fist descend, Kasagi screams in desperation, saying Annex is going to kill him. Facing the attack, he simply closes his eyes, maintaining a calm and focused posture. Remembering the past, he recalls a grimoire in Blue Pine's secret library. Written by an ancestor, the book belonged to a man who trained relentlessly. The grimoire then described the perfect union between a swordsman and his own blade. Having been pushed to the limit by his curses, he is able to understand that secret, saying that he and the sword are one. The branch in his hand glows. With a single strike, the wooden titan is completely split in two. Holding the blade of pure energy, he stares at the result of his powerful attack. A massive slash cuts through the titan and destroys part of the balcony right behind it. Seeing the destruction, Annex and Kasagi look at the scene, completely paralyzed. Amidst the dust, he turns and gets his rival's attention. Letting the branch fall, he warns Annex never to be arrogant with him again. With his defeat, Annex falls to his knees, completely drained of strength. Seeing the titan crumble, Crash pants heavily, feeling the exhaustion from his final blow. He then realizes he's used all his strength, barely able to move now. His legs tremble, making it hard to walk as he nearly loses his balance. Bianca supports him just as Darling runs over, offering to help carry him. Suddenly, he reacts in pain and starts coughing, startling everyone there. Darling warns that he'll die at this rate and asks Bianca to hand him over. Pleading for her trust, he finally manages to take the young man into his arms. As he carries him, the nobles comment in shock about Annex's defeat. Turning his head, Darling notices that rumors about the fight are already spreading. He concludes that whether it was bold or reckless, Crash will be famous when he finally wakes up. Still, something about what happened at the party that night bothers him. He remembers Annex's expression and feels his rival is planning something else. Carrying him, he tells the boy not to die before helping with his research. In a flashback, Crash is seen training, blocking wooden logs. A week after the sanctuary, he trains and says he's finally recovered from the blow. Reflecting on the fight, he says he would have ended up worse than Annex if he'd kept going, if he had been awake. He regrets he could have prepared to steal the skill. He then reveals he had two ideas in mind for stealing skills. His plan was to make his opponent doubt their own technique by completely crushing them. By destroying the target's confidence, executing the theft becomes much easier. When his strike brought down the Titan, doubts certainly began to creep into Annex's mind. Defeated by someone he despised, Annex would begin to question the value of his technique. In time, he guarantees that Annex's recovery skill will be his. That's why he decides to train every day to surpass the geniuses before the academy. Suddenly, the butler Ariette appears at the door and calls his name. Ariette announces that Lord Verokin has arrived, making him realize patience has run out. Even though he's refused twice, he tells the butler to let his brother Verokin in. After training, Bianca approaches and offers him some water. She then comments that he smells like sweat, and he simply asks about it. Sniffing his own shirt, he wonders if the smell comes from using his aura. With that, he decides he doesn't need to clean up before meeting his brother. Bianca then asks him to please keep a certain distance from her. Surprised, he asks if she's giving orders to her own fiancé. Joking about the situation, he says that young Bianca has become much bolder. She then runs off, and he chases after her, shouting that she won't get away. Watching her run, He realizes her stubbornness is also her greatest strength. Shifting to the past, he remembers the people he knew before all this. In his memory, Arthur appears and coldly calls his name. Questioning his attitude, Arthur asks if he thinks he can stop the world's destruction. The memory of Arthur makes him recall the entire journey they had together. Admitting the truth, he knows that Arthur was a true hero until the very end. Back in the present, he wonders what Arthur might be doing at that moment. Then Verokan, the third son of the Valheims, finally appears before him. Looking at his brother, he says that even heroes need a rest. Verokan points out that he used to avoid eye contact, but now he stares directly at him. Confirming the rumor, Crash asks how his brother found the time to visit. Verokan then announces that the academy will be accepting students based on exam results. With a smile, Crash tells his brother he'd better start preparing. Annoyed, Verokan wonders if the boy is mocking him. Boasting about his family's power, he claims to be of pure Valheim blood. He warns him not to get arrogant for defeating Annex, calling the situation a joke, saying it's normal for a commoner to worry. Crash simply replies, "I imagine so." Verokan gets angry at his tone and asks what he meant by that. Changing the subject, he says he came to deliver a direct order. He then orders Crash to go to the Gweb Black Mountains, leaving the boy shocked. He informs him that he will be his guardian and asks if his little brother is scared. Realizing it's a test of strength, he simply agrees to go on the mission. Even if it's a trap, he states that he will find a way out. Seeing that he's leaving, Bianca asks where he's going, and he tells her not to follow. With a smile, she replies that she won't, surprising the older brother. Verokan gets angry, saying it's absurd to send a boy to such an event. Stepping in front of her, Crash confronts him and declares that she is his fiancée. At this, the two brothers stare each other down, not looking away for a second. Without another word, Verokan simply turns and leaves them. Afterward, he gently strokes her hair and tells her she did very well. She replies that she didn't do anything, but says that's fine. Stroking her hair, he just asks her not to faint again. Before leaving, he tells her he will be back and says goodbye to young Bianca. A dangerous phenomenon, world erosion invades and alters reality. Over time, the environment changes and the area can be completely transformed. Arriving at the mountains, they realize the place has turned into a large swamp. A soldier reports that the erosion is level 3. He then comments that an intermediate level squad could handle the job. Another soldier points out that Verokan is an advanced specialist and can handle it all easily. At that moment, Verokan turns and gets his younger brother's attention. He says he brought him there so he could get some field experience. With false excitement, he thanks his older brother for the opportunity. But the only reason he was there was for one thing, a secret objective. He wanted to test a new method to control his own rage in battle. Without wasting time, he charges forward and easily slices one of the creatures in half. Meanwhile, the knights complain that the enemies never stop coming. He warns them about the monster's bites and how they should protect themselves in combat. Impressed, a young soldier asks if he's ever fought in a world erosion before. Replying to the soldier, he says he's only 13 years old. Verokan wonders how a failure can be so calm during his first erosion. He remembers that during his first time, his pride was completely shattered. He then realizes his brother's attitude is completely different from his own. With a smirk, he tells Verokan not to compare him to him. Hearing the taunt, his brother becomes visibly irritated by that response. Verokan then places a hand on the hilt of his sword deep in thought. He then starts to wonder about a future possibility. He considers what would happen if his younger brother grew up like Charlotte. The idea of Crash surpassing him would make him the family failure. Angry, he yells asking why his brother doesn't just become like him. Crash then calls out to him, pulling him from his dark thoughts. He warns that they're close to where the main creature should be. With a smile, Verokan says that luckily it seems easier than before. But he warns him saying they need to be even more alert because of that. Explaining the situation, he warns that a single creature sustaining the erosion is dangerous. At this, Verokan yells at the knights not to lose their nerve because of him. Telling them to handle it quickly, he dismisses them into the forest to fight. Deciding to focus on his own goal, he concentrates to begin his plan. With enhanced vision, he says he can now see the erosion's energy. Taking off his mask, he prepares himself and says all that's left is to absorb the energy. But he admits he's nervous as the whole process is very dangerous. His eyes then widen from the immense pressure of the energy in his body. Suddenly, he coughs up a huge amount of blood, yelling the word step. Verokan asks if he's okay, and he says he just tripped on the ground. Refusing help, he coughs up more blood and feels the energy's effect. He explains that the energy is like a toxin, but he can handle it. Following the grimoire, he begins to mix his aura with the erosion's energy. His aura then merges with the energy, flowing like a powerful river. His eyes then change, showing the result of the fusion of the two energies. Feeling the energy, he hunches over trying to resist the advance of the rage in his body. He then understands what the rage is like, realizing that anyone else would have gone insane by now. Because of this, he decides it's time to use that secret family technique. Recalling the story, he remembers the blind ancestor who found the hidden library. Unable to read the grimoires, the ancestor sealed the door again forever, but he left behind a single grimoire so no one else would get trapped. That grimoire taught the secret art he was about to use. A powerful energy then begins to emanate from his entire body, a perception through aura. The technique was known as the sixth sense. With it, he can clearly understand everything happening around him. Using the technique, he realizes the place is no longer shrouded in rage. Seeing the storm of energy subside, he finally overcomes the rage with his power. Despite his success, he wipes the blood from his mouth, feeling the side effect. Knowing it's temporary, he understands the rage can return at any moment. Because of this, he realizes he still needs Bianca's snow doll curse. Clenching his fist, he says he managed to stabilize his energy, even if just for a moment. For the first time, he feels he has reached a new level of power and control. Just then, he senses a strange presence and turns, wondering what it could be. Before him, a huge creature of flesh with a human face appears out of nowhere. With its eyes closed, the creature's face seems strangely calm and serene at first. Then, the monster's eyes open, revealing a completely hostile and dangerous intent. Attacking the knights, the monster begins to destroy everything in its path. Watching the creature transform, he realizes that it was the core of the erosion. With a terrifying roar, the monster reveals its true and terrible final form. Completely shocked, Verokin can't believe what he's seeing right in front of him. At that moment, he also freezes, understanding the gravity of the dangerous situation. Before the two brothers, the demon of 1,000 faces finally reveals itself completely. Holding his sword, Verokin prepares to lead the attack against the great monster. Then, the blade of his sword begins to glow brightly with his energy. A fiery energy then completely engulfs his entire sword. With his weapon in flames, he prepares to use his technique called Ignis. Amazed, the knights remark that Lord Verokin's power is spectacular. Looking at the scene, he remembers that skill called Ignis. In a flashback, he recalls the same skill that burned his arm before. Alone, he watches his brother prepare for the coming fight. He remembers how his brother used to be completely unbalanced in combat. He then wonders what could have changed in his brother after so much time. With a smile, he says he hopes nothing has changed about his brother. Meanwhile, the monster attacks the knights, who cry out about the enemy's curse. One of the soldiers screams in fear, questioning the curse that erases faces. Another knight says that if even the senior members are struggling, there's nothing they can do. Seeing the danger, one of the knights warns that they should retreat immediately. Ignoring the warning, Verokin charges forward, preparing to attack the monster alone. Leaping into the air, he descends with his flaming sword, striking the monster. Hit by the fire, the monster screams in pain from the powerful attack. The impact causes a huge explosion, devastating the entire battle area. Reaching out his hand, he yells for the knights not to give up and to seize the opening. Astonished, the knights are impressed by Lord Verokin's power in combat. Excited, the soldiers shout to follow their commander's lead in the battle. With a smile, Verokin wonders if his younger brother is watching all this. He then looks for his brother, but can't find him, wondering if he's dead. Then he realizes the young man wasn't looking at him, but at the monster. Surprised, he turns and looks in the same direction his brother was facing. He then notices the monster is crying tears of pure blood. Seeing this, the faces on the monster's body begin to cry as well. With its eyes completely black, Verokin realizes this is anything but normal. With a nervous smile, he understands the situation is very bad for everyone. As he moves toward the monster, he is quickly surrounded by its shadowy arms in the air. Feeling an impossible pressure, he wonders what is happening. He then decides they need to kill the demon before the situation gets worse. Shouting for everyone to attack together, he leads a powerful wave of fire against the monster. When he sees the attack didn't work, he questions how that could be possible. He then orders the knights to attack again before the monster transforms. Furious with their hesitation, he yells at the knights for being afraid of the creature. Suddenly, he realizes all his soldiers are completely paralyzed. Realizing the situation, he understands the curse affected them without even touching them. Then he remembers the disturbance and realizes everyone has already been affected. Facing the creature, he understands the trap they have all fallen into. The scene changes as a heavy storm begins to pour down over the entire forest. With a tightness in his chest, he starts struggling to breathe properly. Lying on the ground, he screams in desperation, saying that it's killing him. With a final scream, he feels he's going to die in that dark, rainy forest. Amidst the rain, a huge, shadowy hand moves to attack the young Verokin. Desperate, he wonders why this is happening to him right now. A voice then says he's going to die because he is simply pathetic. The voice continues, saying he lost his knights and ran away like a coward. Therefore, the voice says he will die as the great failure that he is. The monster's large hand then lunges forward to strike the young Verokin on the ground. Screaming in desperation, he tries to shield himself from the blow with his arm and his sword. But the fist hits him squarely, throwing him far away with its force. Verokin's body then falls into the middle of the swamp, sinking into the dark water. Suddenly, he wakes up on solid ground, being dragged by his younger brother. Surprised, he recognizes his brother and tries to understand what happened. With a smile, Crash says his brother has finally woken up. He says he was watching everything from a distance and that he survived, too. He then explains that he pulled him out of the swamp and brought him to a safe place. Verokin gets angry, saying he can't use his aura in that condition. With a smile, he asks if his brother is sure he doesn't need help. Annoyed by the question, Verokin grits his teeth in anger and contempt for his brother. He then shouts that he doesn't need help from a fool like his brother. Suddenly, a noise catches his attention and leaves him completely terrified. Worried, he asks if the demon is still nearby. Looking at the erosion, he says the field may have closed in around them. Terrified, he realizes they can only get out if they kill the thousand-faced demon. Punching the ground, he yells in anger, and his brother calls out to him. He then reveals he has a supreme technique he learned from Lady Charlotte. He says it was this technique that allowed him to fight Annex. Surprised, Verokin wonders if Charlotte would teach her secret art to him. He asked if his brother thinks the technique can defeat the demon. Seeing he's going to die anyway, he says he'd rather at least try. He holds out his hand and says he understands why Verokin doesn't trust him, but he reminds him of Charlotte's strength, asking if he trusts her. Agreeing, he says Charlotte is a genius and sticks his sword into the puddle, but he warns that if the plan fails, they will both die there together. With a dark smile, he assures his brother that he won't fail. On a rainy night, tension hung over the dark, silent forest. Hidden, Verokin warns that the thousand-faced demon is approaching them. He then asks if Crash is ready with the Ignis and gets a yes in return. Holding his sword, Crash announces that their showdown begins now. Suddenly, someone lands right in front of them in the middle of the rain. With his sword in hand, Verokin prepares for the imminent attack. Closing his eyes for a moment, he fully concentrates for the battle. Crash just watches his brother prepare, waiting for his next move. Wielding the sword, Verokin takes his combat stance, ready to fight. Impressed, Crash comments on his brother's incredible concentration and the aura surrounding him. He claims to have never seen an aura as clear and pure as that one. Remembering he didn't believe in it, he wonders how Verokin uses this aura. Calling out to his brother, Crash finally gets Verokin's full attention. Verokin then asks him to use the Ignis, and Crash agrees immediately. Placing his hand over the sword, he transfers the power into the blade. Taking his stance, the ancestor prepares to unleash his full power. After the explosion, he just observes the scene without saying much. Verokin then asks his brother if something was wrong with him. To this, Crash replies that it seems he won't need any help. With wide eyes, he watches the scene, unable to look away. Wielding his weapon, he prepares for the attack that will define the fight. In a memory, he recalls his confrontation with the creature and his defeat. Then he watches Crash advance alone against the approaching enemies. Advancing bravely, Crash prepares to face the giant creature in combat. From a distance, other members of the Valheim family watch the battle unfold. At that moment, everyone's eyes turn to the sword at the center of the action. With a tense expression, Verokin continues to watch the outcome of the imminent confrontation. Finally, Crash unleashes all the power contained in the sword against his opponent. Changing scenes, the image shows a peaceful stream flowing through a field. In the sky, a distant voice calls for his brother, starting a new memory. With his power unleashed, he announces that the battle has finally ended here. In disbelief, Verokin wonders if it all ended so easily. Filled with rage, he then grips the hilt of his sword tighter. Shouting with fury, he tells Crash to die once and for all. But Crash easily defends the blow, blocking his brother's attack without difficulty. Seeing the defense, Verokin is confused and doesn't understand what just happened. With their swords locked, Crash thanks him and says he can no longer use Ignis. Revealing his power, he thanks Verokin for never changing. With that, the conditions to unlock his true power were finally met. First, he needed to receive the Ignis and for Verokan to believe in his power. Second, his brother's pride needed to be completely broken during the fight. He then attacks, saying that the Ignis became his at that very moment. In the background, the thousand-faced demon screams as it is completely defeated. Fall on the ground, Verokan just hears his brother calling his name. Holding the monster's heart, he says he once wanted to get along with them. Remembering the past, he recalls how they always told him to stay out of it. He then says their hostility made any kind of approach impossible from start. With the sword at his neck, he says he thought his brother would act differently. He regrets having hoped since Verokan never truly had that intention. Pressing the blade, he asks if it hurts as much as it hurt him. As Verokan writhes, Crash remembers feeling the same when they burned his arm. Seeing his brother on the ground, he just watches the scene in complete silence. Then he stands still for a moment, looking at the body on the ground. Looking up at the sky, he lets out an ironic laugh at the whole situation. Then he comments on how the day is ironically beautiful for a moment like this. Switching to the Valheim mansion, a guard announces that Verokan's unit has been annihilated. At this, someone explains that the erosion has been reclassified as rank S for everyone. During the funeral, they comment that Crash only survived because of Verokan's sacrifice. Outraged, a servant shouts, asking why only the family's failure survived. The head butler then orders them to honor the sacrifice made to protect his brother. Asking that the sacrifice not be wasted, he is seen entering the Great Hall. He then realizes they believed his testimony, so there's no reason for them to be suspicious. Walking through the place, he concludes that the mission had excellent results of Verokan. Recalling the process, he confirms that he has adapted and now controls his sixth sense. Through the Ignis, he shows he has gained the power of the black flame in his hand. He explains that the flames are an ace up his sleeve and that no one else needs to know. Arriving at the door, he prepares to deal with the problem of the official investigation. After a voice grants him entry, he notes that the cause of the problem is unknown. Knowing the truth, he knows the blame lies with the invader who uses their servants. A woman receives him there saying that Lord Crash had finally arrived. Introducing herself, the investigator informs him that they were waiting for him there. Noticing the black star, she surprises him with her sudden perception of the mark. She then comments that she didn't expect to meet him again so soon, leaving the young man quite confused. Calling her an immortal, he decides to propose a direct deal to her. Pointing his finger, he offers to erase her immortality forever. With a different kind of smile, she asks if by any chance he might be the regressor. Revealing her other form, she says that fate sent her to the wrong man. In a flashback, the immortal known as August is shown completely chained and defeated. Before the regression, they try to steal his immortality, but ultimately failed their mission. Then, Lord Arthur explains that now he can barely regenerate without any power. Mary Diana understands he used servants because his body was cursed and immobile. Annoyed, Sigrun questions if it's truly a pity, recalling the chaos he caused. Grabbing her arm, Sigrun warns her not to act so self-righteous. Then, Lord Arthur declares the problem is over and there will be no more needless fights. With a steady gaze, he comments that it's still a great pity. Crash then appears agreeing they couldn't steal the enemy's immortality. Damaris then says that even if he were reborn, that would be impossible. He explains that the condition was absolutely impossible for anyone to fulfill. Back in the present, she asks once more if he is the regressor. Revealing her form, she says she was looking for someone completely different from him. Unfazed Crash asks what makes her think he is one. With a smile, she says that only a regressor would dare propose such a deal. Laughing in his face, Abella says he can't kill her and calls it a lie. Stating he doesn't lie, he reveals the strange power emerging in his hand. With his ability, he charges forward and launches a direct attack at her. Then he explains that his power can even steal her immortality. Surprised by the revelation, she just clenches her fist tightly without reacting. Then she reveals that for centuries she has waited for someone capable of finally killing her. Seeing that he is the one, she asks what the condition for the deal is. He explains that he needs help as his ability only works if he is stronger. Therefore, he asks her to make him her own apprentice. Saying she would sell her soul, she accepts his deal without hesitation. Assuming her other form, she introduces herself to the young man as Crimson Garden August. She then promises she will turn him into the strongest man who ever lived. Feeling the pressure of her aura, he realizes her power is overwhelming. Remembering her power, he knows that with her help he can become stronger. With a clenched fist, he vows to protect his world with this borrowed power. Understanding the rule, he knows he can no longer regress on his own, because if the world perishes again, he will disappear along with everything else. Happy to have her by his side, He calls her Krim while extending his hand. Hearing the name, she questions him, seemingly not recognizing the word he said. With a slight smile, she calls him Crash, changing the tone of the conversation. Next, she demands he call her master and flicks him. Relieved, he says he can now finally leave that place forever. Watching him leave, she asks if he no longer lives in that large mansion. Just then, a hooded woman appears. While he barely remembers his parents, informed that his mother is requesting him, he is surprised by the unexpected summons. The woman confirms the request, adding that she also has another message for him. She then reveals that the head of the family wants to meet him, leaving him shocked. He immediately imagines his father, sensed something through the connection with the stars. Asking him to wait, the woman informs him that Lady Arya wants him at the mansion. Annoyed, he asks if the order didn't come directly from his own father. Announcing he's leaving, he says he will only return when his father calls for him. Thinking for a moment, he figures his father might come to him personally. Leaving the mansion behind, his carriage departs without looking back. Passing through the main city, his journey finally begins for real. Following the road, he continues on his way, far from his old home. Inside the carriage, he celebrates, saying he's finally free from that place. But the being at the window orders the rude apprentice to open the door at once. Surprised by the bird, he asks if its color doesn't draw too much attention. Explaining it can change color, it transforms into a common black crow. Crash then replies that the color is as black as her soul. Asked about her body, the crow says her real form cannot move. Without revealing the truth, he knows that the real regressor is actually Arthur. As the sun sets, the carriage continues its journey down the long road. Changing the subject, the crow warns him about a girl at Blue Pine Hall. Confused by the warning, he doesn't understand what she meant. Welcoming him, a hooded girl receives Crash back at the mansion. Whispering in his ear, the crow says she has fulfilled her promise to return. Running towards them, the butler Ariad asks if anything happened during the trip. Handing him a letter, the butler informs him it arrived from Master Darling. Reading the note, he discovers that Darling has completed the cure he had requested. Ariad then advises him to treat Darling well, as he will be a great benefactor. Changing the subject, the butler mentions that Lady Bianca has been very worried about him. He explains that she prepared a carriage to visit him as soon as she heard about the erosion. Hearing the news, he finally realizes the consequence of her concern. Without checking her curse, he sees a strange energy begin to manifest. Just then, the first condition to unlock the seal is revealed: be friends with Bianca. With the condition met, the unlocking process is finally completed successfully. Shocked by the result, he sees that Bianca's first lock has been released. Seeing him stare, she asks if there's something on her face. He says no, just that he wanted to introduce her to someone new. As she reaches out to take the bird, he introduces the crow, Krim. Hugging the bird tightly, he asks if she really likes animals that much. Averting his gaze for a second, he remains silent for a brief moment. Then, the second condition is revealed to become the most precious person to her. The possibilities are then shown, be it a father, a son, a friend, or a lover. Since he's her fiancé, he says,